to Human Dreaming. I'm your host, Britt Shefflin. Susan E. Wigget, welcome to Human Dreaming. I'm so excited to have you here today. I came across your work in one of the dream groups, and you were talking about how you dream and then you write your dreams or you turn them into other stories. And we will definitely dive into that a little bit more. But first, I wanted to start with a few basic questions around dreams and to kind of start to understand your internal dreamscape. So I'm curious, do you or have you ever kept a dream journal?
Yes, I've kept one for years and years and years. I used to write them in longhand. I still have a whole bunch of notebooks, old notebooks. But now, because I have a smartphone, I'm writing them down on my smartphone, which is plugged in next to, like on the nightstand. Yeah, I write them as soon as possible after waking. That way you don't forget them. Yeah, I actually prefer writing it on my smartphone because my handwriting is atrocious. Basically, what I do is I'll first write a description of the dream with as much detail as possible. And while I'm awake and writing, sometimes the dream's meaning quickly becomes obvious. Sometimes it's much more difficult to figure it out. But I end up writing my dream interpretations sometimes, if I have any. I try to finish writing the entire description before I start interpreting, but some dreams are easier to interpret than others. Sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Often I look up elements of the dream using an online dictionary and maybe even a print dictionary if I'm really dedicated and want to take the time to do that. And then sometimes, because I write fantasy and I have very strange dreams. So sometimes instead of interpreting a dream, I think it sounds like a great idea for a novel or story. So I copy and paste the dream description into a Word document called Story Ideas.
That's really interesting. So I have a couple questions based off of what you just mentioned. So um, you mentioned that rather than handwriting, you put them in on your phone, which is great because
Yeah,
whatever works, right? But I'm curious too,
yeah.
is there like a certain app where you do that, or are you just writing it in notes, or where are you putting that?
In the Evernote app.
Okay.
And so I later email it to myself and copy and paste it into a Word document that is about dreams. Oh, yeah, I was about to say a Word document called Dreams, but I've gotten so I write them down so much that I have a different dream Word document for each year. So now
Mm,
it's Dreams 2021.
right.
Otherwise, it would be 1,000 pages long at this
Sure.
point.
Do you tend to remember like a lot of detail, like when you write your dreams down? Is it like a paragraph or is it like a full page? Or like how do your dreams tend to come out as far as like amount of detail?
It varies a lot. If I don't remember that much, it could just be one short sentence or maybe a long sentence. Other times, I would just go on and on for several paragraphs,
Hmm.
which is pretty exciting. I'm like, well, glad I can sit here and do this in the morning. I'm glad I don't have anything scheduled too soon to do that. But yeah, it can go on and on and on. And I get as many details, especially if I'm doing as many details as possible, or it's one of those weird science fiction or fantasy kind of dreams. So
Ooh, very cool. Science fiction and fantasy dreams. That sounds really fun. I have not had the pleasure of reading your work yet, but just based off of your description of the stories, I'm very excited to do so.
thanks.
Yeah. So when you write down your dreams, and you mentioned that like sometimes you actually interpret them and sometimes you're using them as ideas for dreams, which I would just offer up as a little side note that perhaps the intention or the purpose of some of your dreams might be the creative side and they might actually be gifts from your subconscious saying, hey,
Yeah.
here's a story idea for you. So that could be the interpretation, just to, you know, throw that out there. But
Yeah, that makes sense. I
yeah.
actually didn't think of that, but yeah.
It could be. It might be something to pay attention to. But I am curious, when you do interpret your dreams, what process are you using to understand your dreams?
What process? I'm not sure. I remember years and years ago, I had a really interesting meditation related dream and I confided in a friend about it, and she interpreted it. I mean, this was probably around 2003. Yeah, about 2003. That's about when I took up meditation. And but oh yeah, and I think I may have confided in another friend who's into astrology and stuff. And after that, eventually over time, I've gotten better at interpreting my dreams on my own.
Mm-hmm.
But then even sometimes I want to go ahead and check an online dream dictionary anyway, although Dream Moods is currently down, so that seems to be the first one I want to go to.
What is it
But
again? I missed it. It's Dream.
Dream Moods.
Oh, Dream Moods. Okay. And that's just
Yes,
like a website that gives you
yeah, it's
general.
alphabetical. But the trouble with these websites though is it's only you can look up one word
Mm,
and that's it. So I'll like look up one word at a time and then end up maybe looking up several different words that seem very important to that particular dream, like boat, for instance.
mm-hmm.
Red shoe. Well, shoes. I don't know. There was like one dream where there was a pile of red shoes and there was a party going on across the street, and it's like the dream interpretation didn't really make sense because I wasn't the one wearing the shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another weird thing. It's like with a lot of my dreams, I don't know if this is common, but with a lot of my dreams, I'm somebody else, a completely different person. And if you look at dream interpretation, it tends to be you,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, it wasn't me, it was some other person, a future fictional character, you know?
Yeah. Oh, see, that's a really interesting aside. I'd like to talk a little bit more about that because you are right. Most people, it is very self-centered or, me-centric dreams tend to be. But the fact that I mean, everybody usually at some point or another will have one or a few dreams from a different perspective of either just being disembodied or being an object or being an animal or being a different person. But it's pretty
Yes.
rare to have you be that on a regular basis. So I'm really curious, like, do you
Okay.
find that those are a lot of your kind of science fiction, like creative dreams, or is there a theme, or have you identified any of that?
I think that it just varies drastically. It could be a really mundane dream, and I'm somebody else. I have someone else's perspective. I think I once even had like the perspective of like a little boy, like about 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So and I don't know. So that was really out of the blue. Once in a while, I'll even have like one of my fictional characters who I've already created will appear in a dream. This does not happen very often,
Wow.
but this once happened with one of my weird science fiction dreams years and years ago. Basically, starting in the late '90s, I started this sort of series of stories set in it's dark fantasy, but it's historical dark fantasy. It's basically I've recently discovered it's called gas lamp fantasy, where it's basically 19th century. And in these stories, there are a lot of ghosts and demons, sometimes even vampires, although I don't emphasize vampires since they're overdone, you know. But in this one science fiction dream, one of the characters from that world appeared, even though this particular dream was not set in my this version of Regency England. It was like out in space with the spaceships and aliens and weird stuff like that. But then later, I had another dream about her cousin. This was like a really elaborate dream that actually was set in that time and place. It's like Regency England with ghosts and
Mm-hmm.
vampires, and and so that dream ended up inspiring. I mean, her cousin at that point, he was not a well developed character. I had gotten some really negative feedback about him. Oh, he's snarky and sarcastic. What a jerk, which was a shock to me because I originally wrote him as comic relief. He was supposed to be funny, and it just was inappropriate. Inappropriate snarkiness for this, dark fantasy. But in the dream, he ended up having all this really interesting stuff going on that was tragic and all. And I ended up writing. First, it was going to be a short story, but it just got longer and longer. And finally, years after the dream, I turned it into a novel just a few years ago. I think around maybe 2014. So, and it hasn't been published. It's gotten a few rejection letters from agents. I did share it with a critique group, so I'm not just throwing it out there without without feedback.
Yeah.
I have this weird habit of sometimes even after I've received rejection letters, I end up doing a major overhaul, revision, and thinking, oh, if only I had waited and not submitted before this particular draft,
Sure.
But yeah, it was. Oh, and another thing about that particular novel is the stuff that's in the novel. Not all of it was in the dream. It was basically the dream sets up the beginning and sets up the basics of the novel, and I just kept spinning off it. I expanded on it a lot, and at one point the point at which I shared it with my critique group was when I was just utterly stumped, because here's this weird novel based on a dream, a bizarre dream that seemed to come out of nowhere. Not entirely, since this character already existed, but so I ended up sharing it with my critique group and getting really great feedback that ended the I basically had gotten writer's block on this specific project by the time I was like, okay, I'm going to share this with my critique group, and they helped. And also because of what was going on in the world at that time, I was reading books on activism, like anti-fascist kind of stuff, how to, I don't know, overthrow, how to how to protest and whatnot. And I ended up incorporating some of that sort of activism into the novel, and it ended up helping me develop the plot even more, and it ended up being a full-length novel.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, about 90,000 words, more or less.
So, kind of segueing here a little bit, and it could be from any perspective, like as a writer or a dreamer or just a creative person in general. I'm curious if you could create any sort of PSA, public service announcement, in any format, whether that would be a commercial, a billboard, like, a television series, a book, what have you, that the whole world would see. And it could just be anything from a sentence to being more intricate, in any format, essentially. What would your message be? What would that look like? And how would you transmit that to people?
I'm not sure. I think I would say, if it was just one brief sentence, it would be dismantle white supremacist patriarchy, basically.
I love it.
And I'm not sure how I would transmit it. I imagine maybe a Kickstarter, set up a Kickstarter to pay for an internet ad that would pop up all over the internet on websites and social media. And I mean, I could post it on my Facebook or Twitter pages, but hardly anyone would see that on my personal pages.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I've never had anybody mention a Kickstarter before, but that's really brilliant because you get people engaged. I really like that. And also 100% behind that message.
Oh, good. Thanks.
I love it. So I know that you are a very vivid dreamer, and you journal and you use your dreams in your creative life. I'm curious, have you ever had a dream that really stands out as having changed the course of your life?
I don't know if this qualifies as quite that, that huge, but I did have a dream. It's probably between like 2003 and 2007. I took up meditation in 2003, and I found that I ended up being obsessed with Tibetan culture. So it'd be like reading all these books about Tibet and books about Tibetan art. And at some point, I'm not sure if it was right before the dream or like right in reaction to the dream. I got to thinking, you know what, I'm too obsessed with Tibetan culture and need to focus more on my actual meditation. So it was weird. This dream took place in a Tibetan Buddhist temple. It was in the main, really large, huge prayer hall, and there were some monastics standing. I think they were standing rather than sitting on a dais at the front of the front of the building, the front of the prayer hall, and they were giving a talk. They were giving meditation instructions or Buddhist instructions, and their audience or students. I was one of the students, and we were sitting at these long wooden tables. And while a monastic, a lama, was talking, giving this great talk, I was not listening. I had no idea. In fact, I think they may have been speaking Tibetan, and I didn't understand the language. And I was just looking around the room, admiring the decor and not focusing. And I realized what I was doing and felt guilty. And I looked down at the table, and on the table there was this tray that was full of this sort of colored sand that is used in sand mandalas, Tibetan Buddhist sand mandalas. But the colors were all mixed together. It was chaotic. It was just a mess. And I think as soon as I woke up, I knew what that dream was about, that I needed to focus more on my meditation practice and less on Tibetan culture. And at some point, I ended up with a book and CD set called Insight Meditation. It's by Sharon Salzberg and I think Joseph Goldberg. But yeah, through that book and CD set, which was free of cultural baggage. It was it's actually Theravada Buddhism, not Tibetan Buddhism. And through that, I was able to develop a disciplined daily meditation practice, and not so it's totally different, much simpler, straightforward. It's like the original type of Buddhist meditation, pretty much.
Very cool. Like a little less dogmatic.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, Tibetan Buddhism is really complicated. They have it's influenced by Indian Tantra. There's like these complicated visualizations of deities and that are bright and colorful. Whereas with insight meditation, aka Vipassana, you're focusing on your breath. You're not. You don't even need. You can have visualizations like there's loving kindness meditation where you have basically a mantra. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. That's like a very basic, very basic version of loving kindness or metta meditation. So that's part of the insight meditation. It's very simple and straightforward compared to these elaborate visualizations in Tibetan Buddhism. So yeah, I'm glad I switched.
Yeah.
Practices.
Well, I mean, I would say that that's changing the course of your life. And meditation is important, and for some people it's just doing it at all, and for some people it's finding the right thing. So whatever works for you, and being able to focus, and especially us creative types who tend to be like looking all around and being distracted by the shiny things in the world, it really does help to have that time where you're a little more laser focused and just giving your physical body some attention, your brain some attention. So I think that's a brilliant dream, and it seems like you happened upon the correct interpretation right away. That I love that. So when you find knowledge in dreams like that, how do you take that knowledge and apply it to your waking life in general? Like, we know with that dream, you actually changed the type of meditation you were doing and your focus from culture to actual meditation practice. But do you have any other examples of like how you take knowledge from your dreams and apply it to waking life?
But there was also probably like before and after that dream, I was going through a phase in which I kept having dreams that took place at universities or schools, and there was always these long white hallways. The floor, ceiling, walls were all just plain white,
Mm.
which I think is about that represents your consciousness. I mean, that does still occasionally come up in my dreams. I'll be in a space that's completely white like that. Um, but in these, oh yeah, I think it was the first of these dreams. It was when about the same time that I started meditating, or I started getting interested in Buddhist meditation back in 2003. It seems so crazy now. One of the things that was happening was I looked up the composer Philip Glass at the public library, and I came across the film Kundun, which is about the Dalai Lama of Tibet. And so after I watched the film, I had this dream while I was going through the crowded hallways, crowded with students. I was chasing a college professor who strangely was Robin Williams in this crowded, perfectly white hallway. And I kept losing him in the crowd. And I told a friend about that. This is the one where a friend interpreted it for me, and she did a really good job. Um, she basically said, well, the reason why basically Robin Williams represents the Dalai Lama as a teacher, and because you discovered the Dalai Lama through a film, and he's an actor, and it's she also indicated that I was seeking knowledge, and it would be challenging since he kept disappearing in the crowd. And also, there was at the end of the dream, there was this dark scene outdoors. There was it looked like a pile of junk, and I was trying to figure out how to get inside the pile of junk because I was sure that it would lead me to the professor. So she was saying that I need to get through the junk, and it would be challenging to
Very literal.
yeah, it was it's pretty funny. But yeah, since then I've gotten better at interpreting my dreams on my own, just kind of gradually, I think.
Yeah, I like that. So could you just tell us a little bit more about, if, unless we've already covered it, about how you take your writing and then how you translate that and put it into dreams? Like, it gives you kind of like the nugget of the idea, and then you go from there. And it's so interesting how also the characters come back into your life via dreams, but just a little bit more about the process would be great.
Yeah, I'll write, or at least begin to write a story based on the dream. Since I write fantasy fiction anyway, it's kind of helpful that the dreams are so out there when I'm doing that. But yeah, basically I'll take copy and paste the dream description from my dream document, stick it in my story ideas document, and I would say probably the majority of them are still just sitting there, not developed into a story.
Mm-hmm.
But I do end up, when I do actually at least start writing the story, I'll sometimes it's not a character that I've already invented, and so I'll be like, oh, I need to develop this character. One of the problems I come across is dreams don't necessarily have a coherent plot structure. So I have to eventually, there comes a point where I have to make stuff up in order to create a plot. Um, or sometimes the dream is just the beginning of the story, and it doesn't cover going all the way to the end of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've written this one short story that was very, very much based on a dream. It has gotten rejected. It's still not published yet, but which makes I don't know. Talking about this is making me want to like turn more of these dreams into stories and finish some of these stories. But anyway, in this one dream, it was another one of those characters from that dark fantasy Regency England reality, and he was a friend of the other characters, and in this dream, he falls in love with he seemingly falls in love. He's really hypnotized, but by this type of fairy who's the governess of his cousins, these two little kids, at his parents' house, and it's just really weird.
Oh, wow.
But I don't think that I'm not sure, but I don't think in the dream he actually distances himself from her and goes off to London. But in the story, I ended up, okay, this needs to be resolved, because I just, with the dream, I'm pretty sure it ends it with him getting down on his knees and, confessing his love to this fairy. And it's, when I woke up, I was like, oh, this is painful and awkward. I end up having him, he has to, in order to stop being hypnotized by her, he needs to, and snap out of it, he needs to leave. So he goes off to London and is hanging out with friends in London. And he recovers, but his father ends up, well, being hypnotized by her back home at the country house. So I ended up just making up this plot twist that was not in the dream at all. Dreams can be a lot shorter than.
Yes. Oh, that's so cool, though. I really love that, and I agree. I mean, it's like you have this wealth of information, of sources for ideas, so that's really cool. So sometimes you might just like go back through, and if something really grabs you, then start to form that into a full-fledged short story or novel.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. That's a really cool process, and what a gift to be able to have so many stories coming to you in your dreams like that.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So do you want to just let us know where and how people can find you and your work? And of course, I will add everything into the show notes as well, so that they can digitally
excellent.
find it. But just to give them a little something of where they can find you.
Yeah. I think I mentioned I have some books on Amazon.com, and those are published under Susan E. Wigget, Wigget, and under my initials, S.E. Wigget. So basically two initials, first two initials, followed by my last name. But then I also blog on Medium under S.E. Wigget, and I'm on Twitter where my account is at SoWigget, and it's spelled SEWIGET without the extra G. And on Twitter, I do post updates about my writing, so it's a good place to look. Oh, and I also have a Facebook author page, which is also SE Wigget, and it's with 2 G's.
Perfect. So if I were to read one of your books, which one would you recommend that I start with?
Because it's short and whimsical, I would recommend the first volume, and the Womanwick, it's really shiny.
Oh, yeah.
The Womanwick Witches Chronicles. Well, it's not Chronicles, it's just Womanwick Witches. It's less than one. So I've self-published 3 volumes. I know after this discussion, I'm tempted to maybe do a little more, even though I'm not that great at marketing. So the self-publishing has a frustrating side.
Yes.
Desire to have,
That's the hard thing for creatives. We're not always great at marketing, but
that's
why you got to make
things. Yeah.
You got to make friends who know how to market but need creative stuff.
Exactly. I mean, my favorite one. Okay, so there's lesson 1 is spells and enchantments. Lesson 2 is gingerbread. And then lesson 3 is actually my favorite one, Violet and Steampunk Boy. I just had a really fun time writing about those quirky. I introduced Steampunk Boy, he's really into steampunk.
Very cool. So are they they're novel format though, like fantasy fiction?
Yeah, and they're middle grade, so they're children's books, but I think that they are, at least I had fun writing them. I'm pretty sure that adults can enjoy them too.
Oh, awesome.
I mean, there's an eccentric witch named Amaryllis, and she's Violet's aunt, and she teaches her witchcraft, basically. I mean, it's good witchcraft, and she has a talking cat and a little dragon named Brimstone.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I have to tell you this. I definitely need to read these because I have a 7-year-old daughter who is obsessed with dragons and cats and
nice.
magic. So we will definitely need to be reading that. And that is the whole world of what like the books that I'm reading right now is like younger or like young adult
Oh,
fiction, you know, because I'll like read her longer chapter books out loud. She can read really well shorter books on her own, but I read
yeah.
the chapter books like that to her. So I will definitely be checking that out. I'm very excited.
Nice. I wrote, you know what's weird is I wrote the original version of this when I was a teenager back in the 1980s. It was a bunch of short stories, and when I was 19, I thought, since I'm compelled to keep revisiting these characters, why don't I stick the stories together and call it a novel? And, you know, I wasn't trying to be deceitful, but yeah, it didn't really work out as a novel. Years later, like about, I think about 10 years ago, oh, wait a minute, it was 2012, because I just recently found something about that. I shared that the original version with a publishing class, graduate level at PSU, and they gave me a ton of feedback. And it was overwhelming. There was just so much feedback,
Mm-hmm.
including things like, oh, this should be one of the unanimous opinions was that I needed to take it from Victorian England to modern day America. So I was thinking, oh, I guess I should set it in modern day Portland, which is what I ultimately did. But those characters had been with me for so long as Victorians that I felt some resistance, some anxiety over it. And I ended up having, interestingly enough, an editing anxiety, a revision anxiety dream that was quite bizarre. And I recently read how I had written it down. It was in 2012, definitely. And it was just completely insane. It was like, there was this setting in this really dark black room. It's like, instead of the usual white walls, ceiling, and floor, it was just totally black. And there were these sort of stadium seating, like a bunch of judges were sitting on these seats all the way around. I think I was in the middle. It was kind of like in the Harry Potter books where
Mm.
they're being judged and there's all this seating. But it turned out that all of these characters were actually androids, and so I think like some rebellious androids or other androids came in, barging in and beating up the original androids, and they shattered like glass.
Oh wow.
And it was so weird. I'm not sure how I managed to interpret this one, because just reading the description without reading my interpretation, I was like, what on earth? That is crazy. But in my interpretation, the um, the characters shattering like glass was representative of, oh, I have to change these characters from Victorians to modern day Americans, and that's so complicated and intimidating, you know. So, and oh yeah, and I also felt, because I got all, I mean, it was very helpful feedback, but I got all this feedback dumped on me all at once from a whole bunch of people. I felt like I was being judged, and so
Right.
that judgment room, you know, with all these different characters looking down on me and disapproving.
Yeah. It can certainly feel that way even when it's constructive, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it was definitely overwhelmingly constructive. Here's my
Yeah. Oh,
cat.
hi, kitty. Very cute. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. Did I miss anything? Is there anything else that you would like to add before we wrap up?
I think that's about it. Me.
Okay. Well, like I said, I will make sure to add everything in the show notes so that when people listen to this episode, they can be sure to find you, and I'll put links to your books and all of that fun stuff.
Oh,
Um,
thanks so much. Yeah.
yeah, but I am really amazed by by how you managed to take your rich dream life and utilize it in your creative waking life. I think it's really beautiful and inspiring, and I'm super excited to read your work, and I hope I get to
Thanks.
talk to you again.
Yeah, talking about this has inspired me. I'm like, most of these, you know, these dream story things, most of them are unfinished. But now I'm like, I need to go back and finish those. And also, weirdly enough, when you emailed me about this podcast, I was in a Zoom meeting with Writers Coffee Talk, and it was yesterday. I shared with them a dream that I had a couple of years ago that I've decided I'm going to write a novel based on this dream for National Novel Writing Month, which is
cool.
November. So it was like sharing. They were giving me, helping me out with the ideas and all, because it needs a plot and an outline and all that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, again, thank you so much, and I hope we get to talk again soon. And please keep in touch.
Yeah, thanks for interviewing me. This was great.
Yeah, thank you. We are supported by Human Dreaming, The Dynamics of Dream Interpretation by Sunshine Press. The Human Dreaming book can be purchased on Amazon.com, the Barnes & Noble website, or through your local bookstore. For Dream Share or help with interpretation, please join us at the Human Dreaming Facebook group. You can also find us on Instagram at human_dreaming. Thank you for listening and subscribing, and please join us again next week.